Gadgets got reworked, and instead of 3 uses, you can now use them as many times as you want. The question is this rework gonna help the game in the long run, or is it just another failed experiment from Supercell? Well, today we're gonna dive into this rework, testing if it's good, and also giving you guys some tips and tricks to use in your own matches to fully take advantage of specific gadgets. So let's go. First things first, for those of you who live under a rock, let's explain what happened here. Supercell basically buffed all gadgets by giving them unlimited uses. Each gadget has different cooldown times though. Some gadgets got buffed more, some less. Also, they replaced the +1 gear with the gadget cooldown gear. The +1 allowed you to have an extra gadget, where the cooldown gear reduces the cooldown of your gadgets by 15%. Lastly, this is a list indicating the cooldown of every single gadget. Let's see if it's actually a good change though. We're gonna first analyze the pros, and then we're gonna touch the cons. One pro of this rework is that Supercell will be able to just change the cooldown of a specific gadget from now on, depending on how strong it is. For example, if a gadget is super strong, instead of thinking of ways to nerf it or rework it in general, all they have to do now is increase the cooldown, and vice versa. Another good thing about this is that brawlers that depended on their gadgets will now have more uses and will be more fun to play with as well. This also means that the meta is shifting, and a lot of brawlers that were not useful in the past will now have their uses. For example, Sam wasn't used at all in pro play, but with the gadget rework, he can now have infinite gadgets in a match, which makes him a great pick against those squishy brawlers. Lastly, some of the gadgets in the game were completely useless, but with this change, almost all of these bad gadgets got a small cooldown time, so players can choose different builds on different occasions. For example, Ash's second gadget, Rotten Banana, wasn't being used at all, but with its cooldown being at 7 seconds, it can be spammed now, basically giving Ash infinite rage. Okay, now the cons. But before that, like and subscribe, or else your next meal will have to be Ash's Rotten Banana. These changes might not be important to casual players like us, but pro players will need some time to get used to it. Before the update, they used to count the number of gadgets that the opponents had remaining, but now they first have to learn all the cooldown times and then to count seconds in order to see if the enemy has a gadget available or not. It's much more complicated for them now. Basically, there's no resource management now, because players will be able to spam gadgets whenever they want. While that may be a good thing in some cases, it makes the game more chaotic. For example, Ruff's second gadget, Air Support, has a cooldown of 12 seconds, which means he can spam it at least 5 to 10 times in a match now, making it super annoying for enemies to deal with it. And lastly, players might start relying too much on gadgets instead of focusing on fundamental skills like aiming, dodging, and positioning, which will then lead to them being bad at the game, hence more bad randoms. With all that said, here are my thoughts. The gadget rework doesn't seem like a good change now, but once some time passes, it will get better and better. Players are now able to have more fun while playing the game with specific gadgets and change builds depending on their matchups, whereas Supercell will be able to buff or nerf some gadgets just by changing the cooldown time. Pro players will have to get used to it though, and the meta will not be stable for a while, but that just means that there will be a lot more viable choices in the game depending on the map and mode. This is basically a testing period for Supercell. They want to see which gadgets are too strong and which of them are bad. The game might seem a bit messy right now, but Supercell always listens to feedback, and once they realize which gadgets needed buff or a nerf, they will make the necessary changes. That's why I think this update is a great one overall. Now, some tips and tricks that I promised you guys. The meta has shifted a lot, but a lot of brawlers that needed a big nerf such as Lou, Penny, or Juju didn't get one. Also, there are new OP hypercharges that skyrocketed brawlers like Hank and Mr. P at the top of the meta, but I still think that brawlers that depend on their gadgets such as Rosa and Bull are a lot better and will be picked a lot more. So upgrade those and get their gadgets. And just because I'm a good person, here is a small list of brawlers that you should upgrade and which gadgets you should buy for each one of them. Also, you should always be aware of the gadget cooldown. You don't have to know the exact numbers, but there's a big difference between 10 and 20 seconds. For example, always make sure to have your shield with Melody before using your super to go in on the enemy. Otherwise, you're probably gonna end up dying. And once your gadget is ready to use, you should use it as fast as possible. This will give you the advantage because you can cycle it faster than your opponents if they don't use theirs immediately. Now, if you feel that this update makes you spam more gadgets and lose your skills as a player, you can watch this video right here where I explain the one thing you need to get better at that will skyrocket your win rate. So hopefully I'll see you there.